Welcome to Outside Views. Today we're discussing a crucial upcoming milestone in the post-Brexit saga that underscores just how far-reaching the consequences of Brexit continue to be. As of January 1st in 2025, all medicines sold in the UK must comply with new labelling rules introduced under the Windsor framework. And this requirement represents not only a logistical challenge for pharmaceutical companies, but also a broader symbol of the complexities created by the UK's departure from the EU. For those of us who see Brexit as a historic mistake, this story highlights the ongoing costs and difficulties that Brexit has imposed, not just on businesses, but also on healthcare and public policy. The new rules require all medicines sold in the UK to be labelled or marked UK only, ensuring that they are not intended for distribution within the EU. And this change, while seemingly straightforward, is the result of years of negotiations, compromises, and regulatory divergence that began with the Brexit vote in 2016. To fully understand the importance of this deadline, we must revisit the historical context that has brought us to this point. The 2016 Brexit referendum was a pivotal moment in modern British history. The Leave campaign promised voters a new era of sovereignty and independence, free from what they saw as the constraints of EU regulations and bureaucracy. For many voters, the idea of taking back control resonated deeply. But while these promises sounded appealing, critics, including myself, have long questioned the practicality of disentangling the UK from decades of economic, legal, and regulatory integration with the EU. One of the most contentious issues during the Brexit negotiations was the status of Northern Ireland. As the only part of the UK that shares a land border with an EU member state, Northern Ireland occupied a unique and challenging position. The UK's departure from the EU Single Market and Customs Union risked creating a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, a prospect that threatened not only trade, but also the fragile peace established by the Good Friday Agreement or Belfast Agreement. And to address this issue, the UK and EU agreed to the Northern Ireland Protocol as part of the Brexit withdrawal agreement. And this protocol effectively kept Northern Ireland within the EU's regulatory framework for goods, while Great Britain, that's England, Scotland and Wales, operated outside of it. While the protocol avoided a hard border on the island of Ireland, it created a new regulatory border in the Irish Sea, separating Northern Ireland from the rest of the UK in practical terms. For industries like pharmaceuticals, this dual regulatory system introduced significant challenges. The European Medicines Agency, or EMA, retained jurisdiction over medicines in Northern Ireland, while the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, or MHRA, regulates medicines in Great Britain. And this meant that pharmaceutical companies had to navigate two separate sets of rules, increasing costs and complicating supply chains. For Northern Ireland, this often resulted in delays in accessing new medicines as companies prioritized compliance with EMA regulations over the smaller Northern Irish market. Reports of medicine shortages further highlighted the strain the system placed on the region's healthcare infrastructure. By 2023, the challenges posed by the Northern Ireland Protocol had become a focal point of political and economic debate. It was in this context that the Windsor framework was introduced as an attempt to address these issues. The Windsor framework, agreed upon by the UK and the EU, restored the MHRA's authority to regulate medicines across the entire UK, including Northern Ireland. And this move was intended to streamline regulatory processes, reduce costs, and ensure that Northern Ireland had the same access to medicines as the rest of the UK. While the Windsor framework was a step forward in addressing the challenges created by the Northern Ireland Protocol, it also introduced new requirements, including the UK-only labelling mandate that is set to take effect on January 1st. Under the new rules, all medicines sold in the UK must include a label or sticker stating UK only to indicate that they are not intended for distribution within the EU. And this measure aims to prevent parallel trade where goods meant for one market are diverted to another, potentially violating regulatory or trade agreements. And while this requirement is intended to protect the integrity of the UK-EU relationship, it also adds another layer of complexity for pharmaceutical companies. Updating packaging and labeling to comply with the new rules is a costly and time-consuming process, particularly for smaller firms that lack the resources of larger multinational corporations. Julian Beach, the interim executive director for healthcare quality and access to the MHRA, recently reported that 90% of companies responsible for medicines sold in the UK have already updated their packaging to meet the new requirements. However, this leaves a significant minority that must act quickly to avoid potential disruptions. The consequences of non-compliance are severe. Medicines that do not meet the new labeling standards cannot be released to the market after January 1st, potentially leading to supply shortages. Additionally, if UK-labeled medicines were to enter the EU market, it could trigger a serious response from the European Commission. The Commission has made it clear that such breaches could result in the unilateral suspension of the Windsor framework and the imposition of checks on goods moving between the UK and the EU. And this looming deadline has broader implications for the UK's post-Brexit regulatory landscape. The new labelling rules reflect a broader trend of regulatory divergence between the UK and EU since Brexit. And while some see this as an opportunity for the UK to establish its own standards and systems, others view it as an unnecessary complication that increases costs and reduces competitiveness. For patients and healthcare providers, the stakes are particularly high. Ensuring a steady supply of medicines is critical, particularly for those with chronic conditions or those reliant on specialized treatments. Any disruption in the supply chain could have serious consequences for public health. And as the January 1st deadline approaches, the pharmaceutical sector, and indeed the UK as a whole, must confront the reality of the post-Brexit world. The promises of sovereignty and regulatory freedom have come at a significant cost, creating new barriers and complexities that affect industries and individuals alike. And as I said, for those of us who view Brexit as a mistake, this story is a stark reminder of the challenges and uncertainties that continue to shape the UK's future. So thank you for joining me today on Outside Views, and if you found this topic insightful, let me know your thoughts in the comments below the video. Do you think the new labeling requirements are a necessary step toward regulatory independence, or are they just another example of Brexit's unintended consequences? And if you haven't already, check out my earlier videos on Brexit and its impact. They provide valuable context for today's discussion. I'll see you next time with more stories that matter. Until then, take care, and the next video is right here in the end screen.